And she got down there and she rang the bell, and they finally opened, and they saw this little girl standing there, and they said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I came to the ball." And they said, "Where's your ticket?" And so she gave them the 15th Amendment.
Good morning.
That's no ticket. They started laughing. No, that's not going to get you.
Morning. Happy Wednesday.
And then she said, she pulled out the 64.
Is it the first day of spring? It is the first day of spring. Happy first day of spring, right? Always one of my favorite days of the year. My name is Matt Oldani. I'm the Vice President for Strategic Alignment here at the Deaconess Foundation. I'm welcoming you to our funding opportunities and forum, if you will. We hope you'll learn a lot about the direction of the foundation and where we're headed with our funding opportunities. At this point, I'd like to give you a chance to get to know names and faces of the staff of the Deaconess Foundation. So if I could have the other Deaconess staff members come up. Starsky yesterday asked for a volunteer to do this, and I did, because it's much better to open for Starsky than to follow him. So anyway, I'm Matt Oldani, and I oversee or manage our internal operations, so accounting, finances, as well as some of the internal operations, keeping the lights on, if you will, so to speak.
Good morning. I'm Constance Rush, and I'm the Director of Advocacy here at Deaconess Foundation. And you'll hear a little bit more about the different programs that I manage here at the foundation. So I'll save that for later.
I'm Chantel Tate. I'm the Administrative Assistant for the foundation and also Reverend Wilson's assistant.
Good morning. My name is David Narrett Flores. I'm the manager of the Deaconess Center for Child Wellbeing, the facilities that you're in today. So help manage the operations and strategic mission of the center.
I'm Cassell Williams. I'm the coordinator to help set up for the meetings and the maintenance in the building. And thank you.
Michael Schultz. I'm the program assistant for Deaconess Foundation, so I do a lot of communications and logistics.
My name is Starsky Wilson. I get to work with all these people. Please help me thank the staff for helping make this space and meeting available today. So you'll hear a little bit more from David and from Constance a little bit later, but you were greeted by Chantel today and Michael. They are kind of frontline support on all things Deaconess, and Cassell made sure the room was ready, so he's been thinking about you for like the last 2 weeks, wondering how you were going to feel when you sat down and all of that, and of course all of the team worked together to make this possible for you, so thank you very much for being here today. Thanks to the team. So I also want to thank you for, well, I'm going to answer a couple of questions. First, I saw someone holding up the plates like this. David Kirkland Catering would like you to know that everything that he uses is fully compostable. So if you're wondering whether you can recycle those things, yes, you just got to eat everything off of it first. I don't think that's going to be much of a problem because he does a really great job. David is one of our preferred caterers here at the center. He is the guy right outside if you saw him. And he's also the proprietor of Turn Restaurant on Locust. So I encourage you to support his work there, be nourished by the great food. Folks ask me what kind of food they have at Turn. I say it's clean food, you know. Some food you walk away feeling heavy. You don't walk away feeling heavy from his stuff. The other, I want to thank you for engaging us today in this early time of what we call net weaving and inspiration. We knew that you are busy people, and if we told you that we were going to start the program at 8:30, you would have come here at 8:29. And you may have done so without giving yourselves the nourishment that you desire and need, either the physical nourishment through breakfast. You would have had a nice cup of coffee on your way into the office, maybe even a bagel, and you would have perhaps even robbed yourself from the community that you've been able to build at your tables. So thank you for allowing the space to connect with one another to get to know one another and to share with one another. I joke with the people at my table that we thought that the video of Marion Wright Edelman from last April when she was here to kind of open the facility to the community would be really inspiring to all of you. But when we came in the room, we recognized you were being more inspired by one another at your tables, and that all works really well for us. So thank you very much. So I get to go into this conversation a little bit about kind of who we are. I want to kind of orient you to a couple of things before moving forward, though. First, on your tables, you've got a few things. There are agendas there in the middle of the table. There's one for each of you. There are also on the table some tools, if you will, for conversation. We recognize things come up at different points, and we have on the agenda to have some open discussion at the end. Of course, we're open to discussing at any point throughout, but if you have thoughts that pop up, we've kind of organized a space at the back of the room for ideas, questions, and provocations. So that as we're going throughout our presentations, if something comes up for you, you want to jot it down, you've got sticky notes there. You can jot those down and feel free to just place them up on the board. And we'll kind of begin our conversation with things that come from there. You may be one who doesn't want to raise your hand, doesn't want to ask a question. You don't have to put your name on it, but that also helps us to capture for follow-up things that we need to share with folks offline after the meeting. Is that okay? So you've got pens, you've got pencils, you've got sticky notes. There's only one stack of sticky notes, though, so there are 5 of you at a table. Don't use them all. Share some with your neighbors. So use those, and feel free to move into flow. So we're trying to build a movement for child well-being, so we don't need people to be static. We're not going to be distracted if you get up and walk and put something on the back of the board, or if you need to stretch your body, some of these pop-up tables are there in case you want to stay, you're still in, but you're tired of sitting. There are some pop-up tables that you can use if you want to do that as well. Now, this all sounds like we're going to keep you a really long time, but no, we're going to get out of here at 10 o'clock. Is that all right? Good deal. So feel free to share those. Also, just outside of this door, in case you didn't see, if you go outside and go to the right, there are restrooms there to your right, if anyone needs those. In the center of your table are also pipe cleaners, in case you're one who's a creative. There are also some things that are there on the table where other people have created before you. If you can do that, I envy you, because I'm not creative in these ways. There are artists and organizers on the team. I'm not one of them, but if that helps you to focus, those are there for you as well. Any questions right up front? Good deal. That being said, we've been integrating some of the voices of people who joined us as we opened this facility last year, who came to us in a community conversation series. And so one of the ways we get into conversation about what our strategy is and what our vision is by use of one of those voices. So I invite your attention to the screens for a 2-minute video from the voice of Leslie Crutchfield, the author of How a Change Happens, and who came to share with us last year. That'll center our conversation on how Deaconess seeks to do its work. I invite your attention there.
The last practice is be leaderful, and comes out of some of the teachings of Ella Baker, the great civil rights activist. And what I mean by leaderful can be contextualized kind of across the spectrum. You think about some movement leadership could be described as leaderless, right? It's chaotic, it's mob rule, it's anarchistic. Remember Occupy Wall Street? They were leaderless. They said everybody gets one vote. They got more than 20 different, demands. They're constantly protesting, and what happened? Kind of fizzled away. They did get that call for the 99% into the vernacular, but it kind of went away. On the other end, you can have leader-led, top-down movements that have too much resources and power at the top and not pushing out to the grassroots, where the successful movements we found were leaderful. And they found a way to get money, resources, training, and grassroots, local and state-based action having the balance, right? So how did they do that? Because they had, from the grass tops, a leaderful mindset, right? In tobacco control, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids played this role. In marriage equality, it was freedom to marry. In drunk driving, it was MAD. They saw themselves as sort of a director of an orchestra, trying to get all the groups around them to kind of move in the same direction rather than dictate from the top down. And when there was one organization that was the central player, like let's take the NRA. You think about the NRA, you might think of it as more of a pyramid, but they describe their leadership structure as an upside-down pyramid where the 5 million members are on top, and leadership is just the tip of the spear in Fairfax County, Virginia, right outside the Beltway. They set up an 800 customer hotline. If your second rights are being infringed anywhere in the country, call this hotline. They'll help you form a SWAT team. They go to every city council meeting, right? And for many years, if there was a city council or a state discussion happening in the legislative hall, there was 40 guys from the NRA there and no one from the other side speaking up. Now that's begun to change because of the grassroots mobilization and gun control. Again, you got to fight fire with fire. So those are the 6 practices. We're going to do some Q&A with Vanessa, and then I'll have a few closing thoughts.
So talk a little bit about how we seek to do our work. One of the handouts in front of you has more detail than you will ever desire. But where I'll be working from is if you turn the page from your agenda, there are 2 sheets, one on the left, one on the right. The one on the left is a 1-page summary of our strategic direction, which we'll get into a little later. And the one on the right really kind of lays out our theory of change. So this is how we attempt, more than anything else, to be conductors in the orchestra amongst and amid wonderful partners like all of you who are doing work. Not to dictate to you, but to try to be supports alongside you as you advance a movement for child well-being in this community by caring for children and families through advancing public policy and racial equity. So we, a few years ago in 2014, began to talk about how we would evolve our work. So we had been, since 2004, deeply engaged in work that we define and the community began to define as organizational capacity building. So we would work with a small set of organizations for multiple years, and we would seek to make deep investments in those organizations to strengthen their leadership, their adaptive, their management, their technical capacity, and their culture. And we learned a lot from 22 organizations that are critical to work in this community. Organizations like Nurses for Newborns, like St. Louis Crisis Nursery, like Big Brothers Big Sisters of Eastern Missouri, like the Boys and Girls Clubs of St. Louis, which were then Herbert Hoover Boys and Girls Club, and help to develop networks and come alongside those organizations to help them strengthen who they are in their core, not to invest in their program. We said, they've got a remarkable program. We're not going to try to screw that up. What we're going to do is make sure that the container of the organization is deeply invested in to make sure it carries on for many years and grows to advance leadership within the context of the sector. Make sense? So from 2004 through 2012, we continued that work, and we said this is critically important. We need to invest and leverage it. But there was this other stuff that we were doing. We just hadn't put a name on it. I'll talk a little bit later about engagement and high-impact initiatives, but we had staff members who were providing leadership to initiatives in community in ways that were powerful to address things like lead poisoning in the city of St. Louis, to address college access through collaborative engagement and collective impact models. So what we did really more than anything else in 2013 is we began to say, let's locate the work in clear ways and talk about ways that we're actually building the entire community's capacity. How are we investing in and supporting the development of civic infrastructure that allows for the advancement of child well-being? And so we said, you know, there are really 4 core zones that we work in. First, of course, we're a foundation. We need not get it twisted. At the end of the day, we are here with capital, and we should be writing some checks. You know, sometimes we can get a little excited because people let us talk and laugh at our jokes, but we're the people with capital, and so we should write some checks. First and foremost, financial investment is a critical way we do our work. Second is this idea of community engagement. How do we offer the resources of the wonderful staff that you just met to the community? Whether we're making a grant with someone or not, how might they be consulting partners? On this staff, you have a remarkable artist who knows technology. On this staff, you've got someone who's worked in corporate sector with foundations and done development work. On this staff, you've got someone who's done legislative advocacy in Jefferson City, worked in communications and in law. On this staff, you have someone who's been a community organizer, working in immigrant rights issues and also in advocacy for affordable housing. And we can't put all of that to work, but you can. So we want to talk about how we offer that to the community, that kind of intellectual capital of the team that we've been able to gather, but also policy development. We learned in some of the collective impact work we were doing that there were things that needed to be shifted in the landscape. We had invested in remarkable organizations, and we understood that they would be critical to the future of this region, but we also knew that we could be developing remarkable glitter on a dark landscape, because the state is still the #1 payer. The conditions in our community are not meet for child well-being, and that requires new policy development and, of course, some advocacy. In the advocacy realm, we recognize that we have some partners in the life of the church. We are a ministry of the United Church of Christ. We want to leverage that faith-based and moral voice on behalf of children, and we want to do that policy advocacy with all of you. So this is how we seek to do our work. In the middle of your table, if someone hadn't grabbed them all, I know you have really nice neighbors, they didn't do that to you. There's a little card that looks like this. And it's our way of explaining a little bit of who we are and how we seek to do this work. But this is our whole approach. Everything we do should be able to fit into one of these circles, and this is how we try to advance this work. When it was up to me to try to explain this, I was around and came up with that really long logic model thing that's on that second page. When Constance needed to do it, she's like, nah, let's get it on a card. So thank Constance for the card. Thank you very much. So that's really a little bit about our approach to how we seek to do our work. Any questions? Again, room for questions, ideas, provocations on any of that. Yes, Charlie.
I'm wondering what the policy development looks like and how we can leverage you all's expertise there.
Great question that we're going to get to in just a minute. So I'm going to invite you, Charlie, to do me this favor, because I'm going to forget it. Put that on the sticky note there to make sure we get it, and post it right behind you. So you got good proximity to this thing, right? What does the policy development look like, and how might we engage in partnership on that? And I want to make sure we remember it, but I actually want Constance to answer it because I know it's in her slides. Yes, another question.
Can you say, you said you're a ministry of the United Church of Christ, so can you tell us or help me understand what the role of the values or priorities of the UCC is in priorities of Deaconess?
Great question. So she asked a little bit, please remind me of your name. Sarah, yes. Sarah and I were talking about the Interfaith Committee for Latin America and some of the work that she's doing, and she's actually doing some work in one of our congregations, the Kirkwood United Church of Christ. So Deaconess is a church dressed up like a foundation. Is that everybody effectively confused? So Deaconess is a supporting ministry of two conferences, the Illinois South and the Missouri Mid-South conferences of the United Church of Christ. The United Church of Christ is a progressive Christian denomination, Protestant and mainline, that has a deep concentration of health and human service agencies right here in the center of the country, here around St. Louis. Some of that is because of the large influx in the mid-1800s of German immigrants into this community, where they established ministries like the Evangelical Deaconess Society of St. Louis, based upon their marginalized status, yet their cultural roots and their commitment to care for their own, right? So those things being said, that heritage means a lot to us, and it informs our values. It does not constrain our ministry. We're not a ministry to the church. We're a ministry of the church, which means we serve others on behalf of and as an expression of faith. On the staff team, you'll note I'm the only person on the staff team who is affiliated with the United Church of Christ, but a good portion of our board, actually 8 of our 15 trustees on the board, are members of the United Church of Christ. And these things inform our values. So one of the things that David may note, so I'll steal his thunder for later, that you are sitting in the Justice Community Room. Not just the community room, the Justice Community Room. Justice is our first value. So Deaconess is driven by 5 values. Those values are actually the names of each of the 5 convening rooms in Deaconess Center. So they are justice, hope, service, identity, and faithfulness. And so the one on identity, which is the value that locates our chapel, says that our identity as a ministry of the United Church of Christ should inform our actions. To me, that says to me that we should engage in innovative ways. We should be thoughtful about commitments to justice, and our orientation should always be aligned in a progressive posture. All right. I'm going to push to talk a little bit about our theory and logic model. So this is why this is important. Some of you have seen this before, so I won't go too far on this. So it's on the slide and it's also in front of you. This is what I'll say about this. This is a worksheet, okay? I told y'all we were a church. So if I was in church, I'd say, let the church say worksheet. So repeat after me, say worksheet. Worksheet. What is the value of this as a worksheet? If you actually use, and I know nonprofit people in the room, people have made you use logic models. Some people hate logic models. Some people have like a twitch and a hive comes up when you say a logic model. So it's a worksheet. That's all it is. Let's say worksheet. So as a worksheet, when you get prepared to complete the application for funding from Deaconess, or when you're thinking about, or you're coming through the platform that David will show you to request space in Deaconess Center, you can draw a line, it won't be a straight line, from the left side to at least the middle of this worksheet to inform how you are developing your application. So what you're going to ask yourself first is, what am I asking for from Deaconess? I'm asking for some resources from the investment portfolio. That's what I'm asking for, because I'm asking for a grant. And then as I think about the 4 areas where Deaconess does its work, those outputs that we just talked about in community capacity building of investment, engagement, development, and advocacy, which one of these things am I asking for? I'm asking for a responsive grant. And so I can circle that and draw a line. And then I'll draw a line and say, which of the 4 strategy screens from Deaconess does this grant go through, right? Am I working in early childhood education, justice and equity for youth, family economic mobility, or comprehensive health care? And once I know that, then I start going into these areas where Deaconess has gotten a little more specific about what it wants to get done. Informed by, and some of these resources are on our website, so we didn't print them all out for you. Informed by a strategy called results-based accountability and the Changing States framework out of USC. We have developed and centered on certain capacities that we'd like to see influenced in order to shift toward child well-being in certain arenas that need to be changed. That is rooted deeply in those concepts from the Changing States framework, and also certain results that we want to see at a population level. And that's what results-based accountability is about. So what you should be able to do is to say very clearly, these are the capacities that we seek to influence. We want to make sure that youth and child advocates are better positioned to move systems, right? You can circle that. And then we say, because they are, then policymakers will be more aware of innovative solutions. And if that happens, we believe youth can receive just treatment under the law, right? So that's the piece that John Chasnoff and the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression, I just wrote their application narrative, right? That's how they're working. And so we encourage you, and we provide this to you as a worksheet. Let the church say worksheet. It's not a logic model. It's just a worksheet, right? To help you develop your thoughts, because this is how, when we see the applications, we'll be asking these questions, right? Can we draw the lines you drew? And can we see those things clearly as we work through that plan? Questions about, actually, I said you're going to write your questions. So I'm going to give you a moment. I'm going to stop talking, invite you to jot any questions, any provocations, or any ideas based upon the worksheet. Invite you to jot those down. Staff does not believe that I'm ahead of time, but I am. They also trust that I will find a way to get behind time. Anybody have something jotted they just don't want to walk? If you raise it up, I'll walk it for you. You walk? Okay, thank you. Good deal. I'm from Texas, but someone told me that Missouri loves company. Maybe they said misery. There are things that you do that we do as well. One of them, over the course of the last year, it wasn't miserable at all. It was quite creative and generative. It was a joy. But it's one of the things that we do that you have to do as well, is engage in strategic and long-range planning work. So in the last 2 years, whose organizations have gone through strategic or long-range planning? Yeah, see? Missouri Company. And so we spent the last year engaging in this work here at Deaconess, being thoughtful about our changed circumstances. We have this idea. So this is hope for others. This is hope. We actually can say that the plan that we developed in 2013, that we announced to community in 2014, that we engaged in over the course of the period through 2018, we checked off the last box of the plan when we moved into this center. It felt so great to say you were going to do something. Like we had the same consultant we worked with last time, we worked with this time. He said, it's great that you actually said you were going to do stuff, and then y'all did it. We were foolish enough to believe that's what you're supposed to do. And so we were really excited to kind of move into this direction. And two things you'll note from this portion of the presentation. Number one, if ever at all possible, you should be able to get your plan onto one page. We were able to get it onto one page. Now, we use really small fonts and narrow margins, but we got it on the one page, right? Trying to exercise what you all exercise, right? We're working on it. So there's a one-page summary of our plan there on the left side right after your agenda, and I'll walk through key elements of it so you have a sense of where we're going. Yeah, we're going to we'll talk about, and we talked a little bit about the funding approaches, but I want you to know what's going on with Deaconess broadly. Where are we going in the world so that you have a sense of how we see grant making as a part of that, but not all of that. Make sense? So we see this as an evolution of the strategy. The thing that has changed the least from an orientation standpoint has been the funding. We were critical and thoughtful that what we did not want to do was being a place where every 4 years we're having these meetings and telling you we're doing something totally different. So you'll be pleased to note that if you were in one of these conversations in 2017 when we were talking about our funding opportunities, those largely as platforms have not changed. Our focus within them has changed, and that has impact on this plan. So I want to walk through that just a little bit. As we talk about kind of where we are going, we were able to affirm right up front that our vision is on point. Right? So our vision is clear. So you see at the top of the page, what's our vision? We envision a community that values the health and well-being of all children and gives priority attention to the most vulnerable. Our vision is clear. That's the same vision statement, but our vision has gotten more focused. And so you see an added statement there, a statement of our own commitment to racial equity that has evolved over this time. And we noted needed to be much more centered in our overall work. So we also note that this community only thrives if the allocation of power and distribution of resources, benefits, opportunities, and burdens are not predictable by nor predicated on race. Now, I added that into the slide. That is a statement of addition that has been recommended from our Racial Equity Task Force. It has already been integrated into the language about this center, and the Racial Equity Task Force of the board that has been operating since last year has pushed this to the board for action to change our vision statement in May. So this is the preview. This is the preview. And because Reverend Norma Patterson, who's on our board, was in that meeting, I know we at least got one vote. Amen. We got one vote. But this is one of the things that we've been clear about, we've learned about over the course of our journey, that we can work toward this stuff. It has been something that we have centered for years. If you look at the first Deaconess website from 2002, you will see that we affirm that race and poverty were critical predictors of child well-being. Here, we just get much more explicit about it in our vision statement. Make sense? As we go throughout there, we also affirm these 4 areas of work. They've been the 4 policy zones, and they are our strategy screens. So they operate for us in 2 ways. Number one, they inform our voice in community, and they help us to focus our decision making. So grant requests that don't fit in one of these 4 buckets, or requests for space that don't fit in one of these 4 buckets, we don't have the facility to fund or to grant, right? So these help us to focus our energies and our attention, right? So access to comprehensive health care, family economic mobility, justice and equity for youth, and early child care and education, specifically increased investment in those. So these have not changed. These impact statements in areas, these policy zones and strategy screens have not changed for Deaconess, even in the new plan. Make sense? What we noted, though, was that there are some gaps in the community. Remember, our focus is on community capacity building, net weaving this civic infrastructure to advance child well-being, and we identified 3 critical gaps in our community that were keeping us from getting to those outcomes. Number one, a lack of democratic access and participation by historically underrepresented and affected communities. What does that mean? The people who are impacted by public policy don't have enough power over that public policy. And so us investing, as we did last year, in a policy grant, in integrated voter engagement with the MOVE Collaborative and partners with Missouri Jobs with Justice, an Organization for Black Struggle, and A. Philip Randolph Institute that focus on the black community, help to focus on black voters and potential voters, helped to increase access to and democratic participation, right? And we're looking for more opportunities to engage the community around issues and to make sure that people have access to participate. Now, we do this with some of our grant making. We also do it with our voice. We do a lot of learning in this space. So I'm an advisor to 3 different initiatives that are all about voter engagement, voter access, and responding to voter suppression, right? So we recognize, yes, it's about child well-being, and because those children don't have votes, and because those children don't have lobbyists, and because those children don't write checks to elected officials, we need their parents to be able to have powerful voice in the process and have access to it. So this is a critical gap for us. Yes, ma'am.
Is that able to be, I shouldn't say able to be stretched, but for young adults and youth, can the democratic process, the access not necessarily be a vote, but be preparation?
Yes.
To vote responsibly?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Absolutely. Voter education, so the continuum of voter education, voter registration, young people. So yes, we fund youth organizing and conscientization of young people around issues. Absolutely. One of our partners, American Friends Service Committee, does work with Youth Undoing Institutional Racism. They use the space and they use funding to help to orient young people for the democratic process. Yes, Sarah.
Another question, similar line of questioning, but I really enjoyed hearing about democratic access and participation. How does the Deaconess Foundation understand that when it comes to non-voting voices, non-citizen voices, and immigrant voices, that I think also should have the same access and participation that is not tied to a vote?
Yep. Thank you very much. So this is not just about the franchise, to your point. The example I used was, right, but education and the work of affected communities, right? So we've been very pleased to be partnered for a number of years with the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis that is doing organization advocacy among college students, affected community, but specifically looking at DACA impacted students over the course of the last number of years and continuum both in Jefferson City and in Washington, D.C., and to be thoughtful about how we bring voices to the table. So yes, it's really about impacted communities, Again, engagement in the process and the franchise, and in many cases, protecting that process and franchise. I won't go deeply there, but I mean, this is a piece that informs, there's some initiatives moving in our community that would move without people having voice in them. And so when we see those, we see some obligation to speak up, because when you move without people having voice, no matter the merits of the proposal, like we can't get to the merits of the proposal until we get through people who are impacted by it actually have voice in it. It's also one of the principles of racial equity as well, as we talk about impacting and affected communities, right? We'll talk about these other two. The next one, similarly, family voice in economic development, supporting asset building through affordable housing. Why do we talk about this? We talk about this as a very critical contextual point. $8 billion worth of investment and development happening between the river and Washington University, so the city's limits, right now. Very little affordable housing, most of it market-driven community development or market-driven economic development, not community-driven community development. So how might we support community voice in those processes? How might we raise a conversation about things like community benefits? How might we be intentional about the responsibility for people who are impacted in communities to have jobs on projects? All of these things support, as we think about our policy zones, family economic mobility. The most significant asset that a family will gather is a home. The most significant challenge that we have for extraction of wealth from families is the proportion that people spend on rent and on housing. So as we think about the position that families find themselves in, this matter of affordable housing is critical. And so we saw that as a gap to address this area of family economic mobility. And then finally, racial equity and inclusive leadership in the social sector. One of the things that we've been spending a good bit of time on as we talk about how racial equity impacts our work is where our partners are, learning about things like relational capacity. One of the things that philanthropy, can we have a confessional moment? Any Catholics in the house? Good Catholics in the house? Okay. All right. I said Catholics and I said good Catholics. I'm glad all of y'all kept your hands up. I hope your priest would agree. So moment of confession. Moment of confession. One of the ways philanthropy in the context of the social sector has in fact advanced or grown inequity is by thinking about capacity without thinking about relationship. So we assess a grant application based upon what do the financials look like, who's on the board, whether they've got clean audits and all this kind of stuff. Now recognizing that there are some institutional marks that enhance barriers, and when we don't give money to institutions that don't have some of the things that if historically they've not had access to, we're actually increasing the inequity. So we spending some time with this. We began to wonder why do these inequities exist? And there's a report called Race to Lead by a group called the Movement Building Project. And what they identify is this tracks to leadership. So why does this matter? Organizations, in the same way some of you do work with children, you know better than I do that in the classroom, something that we call relational capacity, the connection between, or the cultural connection between a teacher and a student has much to do with how that student can learn. Well, we've learned that the same thing happens for organizations. That when an organization reflects the community that it says it serves, when its staff reflects the community it says it serves, when the board reflects the community it says it serves, that is actually a capacity for getting work done. And when there are things that inhibit leadership from those communities, then you're actually undermining the capacity to get the work done. This Race to Lead report looked at the desired leadership or the capacities for leadership within nonprofit organizations among racial groups. What they found was that they wondered that why is it that we have this gap in leadership for people of color in nonprofit organizations, on boards and in executive leadership? Is it because they don't have the same education? No. Statistically insignificant difference between people of color and white people as it relates to education in nonprofit organizations, about 2 to 3%. Is it because they don't desire to be leaders? No, actually, people of color want leadership more than their white counterparts. What are the things that may keep them from being leaders? Number one, implicit bias of boards. Boards that have not done their own work as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion actually inhibits the relational capacity of the organization, keeps them from better being able to do the work. Number two, access to capital. Yep, philanthropy, here you go again. That people of color candidates don't have the same networks and access to development capacity, to financial capacity in order to move this work forward. And so we see two things that we can do there, but we've got to center the issue. And so you'll see on your checklist and application, we ask questions about racial equity, inclusiveness, and leadership in the organization. And we seek to advance that through supports that we provide. And we'll talk about one of them a little bit, supports that we provide for organizations to help get that work done. Make sense? So all this said, here I am now on my time. Our strategic aspiration and direction is to help build power. This is really what it's about. So when I talk about this, I say there are three things. This is a piece that drives this from the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy. It helps to frame our work. How do we plan to change those circumstances? We want to build power, wield power, and share power with our partners. Building power is how we use our own voice. It's how we invest in the work that you are doing. Wielding power has to do with advocacy on the field with you, helping to engage directly around these issues. And sharing power is how we collaborate, how we use our convening capacity, our engagement, and the like. Not only in a strategic plan do you need to be able to get it on one page, but you need either a really goofy alliteration or you need a really corny icon to help people remember. This is our corny icon. So this is what's going to be going on here. And this is on the page that you have in front of you if it's easier to read there. First, we want to be really intentional about living our values. One confusion that we sent out the invitations for this for a training that we're going to do in April, and we said that the training was for our funded partners. People didn't know what that meant. What do you mean by funded partners? Because part of what we want to do is we want to shift from the language, from the challenging language that has power dynamics in it, of funder and grantee. The reality is we're all partners. We have access to a resource. You have access to a resource. Our resource means nothing without yours, and perhaps there are some things we should be doing to partner together. So we actually want to look at how we do that. One of the ways we got to do that is we got to subvert that power dynamic. Another way we're looking at doing that is strengthening the integration of racial equity in the sector and in our organization. Another is thinking about a blended leadership continuum. So we do a lot of leadership development work. How might we think about what we're doing and how it supports what you're doing to create leaders for the movement? Second, David will talk about this maybe a little bit, leveraging Deaconess Center and its place. For the first time in 20 years, we have a neighborhood. We had a neighborhood at One Metropolitan Square, but it wasn't the same kind of neighborhood. So we really want to be intentional about how we might be a good institutional neighbor. And in light of the kind of economic development that we see happening in our community, we want to think about what it means for us to be in the middle of it. I tell people we're in the middle of a pyramid. So when you came here, you came into a pyramid. The pyramid includes the cortex on one side, City Foundry on another, and NGA on another side, which means that our neighbors in between are in the middle of this pyramid as well. So in the interest of that economic development commitment we talked about, of family voice and economic development, we want to think about how we might be good neighbors. And a lot of that is how do we leverage the network of people who come through this space. 13,000 people have come through this space for different convenings around child well-being in under a year. How might we connect those people, support those people, serve those people, so that we impact some of these issues? And then we want to continue to expand our thought leadership and advocacy, and that looks at even more pointed platforms to be able to do that. C4 structures if need be. I was on a convening yesterday about political action committees and how they might be seated from people from outside of this community in order to advance community voice in this community around our issues. Because I'm very clear about something, and so I'm going to try to punctuate and leave at this point. We have the best ideas anywhere. We have some of the strongest advocates in the country. And we have organizations whose models and programs are being replicated across the globe, right here in St. Louis. And yet, with all that understanding of program and understanding of policy, we do not yet have the power to make sure they get to every child. And so what we're about is trying to figure out ways we can help build more power. And some of that requires us to do this other thing that you all are doing. So here I seek to associate with you again, is strengthen our core. And that's not just that I got to lose this right here that I didn't have 5 years ago, but rather we've got to invest in some of our own operational capacity, technology, and the like in order to be able to serve you better. To be able to optimize functions. Like Constance and some members of her team are helping us to wrap our heads around integrated online application rather than just kind of, getting rid of some of the paper, how might we fully integrate that? And that'll be a platform that we seek to have up, at least for your side, kind of how you interface with it over the course of the next 2 weeks. Right. So I'm going to jump out of the way and seek to transition at this point with recognition that you can jot down any questions for me on this point later. I say all of this to note that in order to get any of this done, we got to have different kinds of relationships. We want to have partnerships, and we got to build trust with you. And so we've asked our board, and our board has noted when they affirmed this plan that they've allocated resources to help us to build trusting relationships and to make this evolution in a way that is valuable to you. As we think about that, we want to remind, recenter, some of you were here for this conversation, of what the critical element of relationship is this conversation. And so remind you of the voice of our dear friend, Gregory Ellison, who came and led something here called Fearless Dialogues. And so I want to go to the video on that. And then after that, we'll pick up and talk about some of our opportunities for partnership.
What does it feel like to be invisible? Today, we will begin to retrain our eyes to see those who are invisible, to attune our ears such that we might hear those who are screaming from the shadows. Welcome to Fearless Dialogue. We ask, how does it feel when your friends, your family members, your coworkers act as though you do not exist? We never know how not seeing somebody and not hearing them could be pushing them closer to the edge. This is life or death work.
You are fighting to better your community, but you got to fight where you are, which is on the margins. So while going around, you're moving constantly outside people, you don't stop.
There are four basic needs that every human has. There's a need for a sense of belonging, self-esteem, control, and meaningful existence. And either you have been rendered invisible, or you're the person that made someone else feel invisible.
I'm looking at all of these people from around my life, and I'm standing in the center of this room, and I think to myself, not a single person in this room who believes that they know me intimately knows me. And so I had to begin to wrestle with, what does it mean to be alone together? How do I find home in a place where nobody really knows me? And then I had this epiphany. Home is not a physical place. Home is to be understood. And so I began to wrestle with this sense of aloneness. When have you had to become a neighbor to yourself because you stand in a strange land?
So our partners at Fearless Dialogue talk about an approach to engagement that requires people to be seen, to be heard, and then to make change. You can't make change until you see people, right? And so part of how that informs us even today is this modeling of a space and an opportunity. We could have come in and had a 90-minute meeting. Y'all could have been gone. And we could have started without an opportunity for you to see each other. But one of the things that actually partners have told us that they wanted was this space to be together. And so We try to build it in. Try to create platforms for people to be heard, even in our gatherings, right? Some people don't want to speak in front of a whole group, not as bold as some folks who raise their hands, so maybe that platform is a board on the back. But we also recognize this sense of isolation. So one of the things we've learned from our deep engagement organizational capacity building work is that executive directors, like some of you in this room, don't have a place to take stuff. You can't take it to your board till it's ready. And you can't bleed on the staff when you're trying to figure it out. So who do you talk to? Created space and executive director roundtables have been one of those pieces, and nurturing partnerships with staff people who you can trust to share things with and know that it's not going to be brought back up of a concern on your grant application is part of what we seek to curate. That's the kind of relationship that we want. We've been able to do that in certain pockets and places. We want to be able to do that more expansively, which means that we needed to expand our team. And so we're glad that Michael has joined us. Michael is in his second week as our program assistant. This part of his orientation. And we're in the process of hiring a remarkable person to be our director of partner support and capacity building. Now, I don't know who that person is yet. We've done the first round of interviews. I don't know who it is yet. But I know it will be a remarkable person. Because as I told each candidate, I've got this certain privilege that I get to work with people whom I love, whom I respect, and who I can learn from. And I know that whomever this person is, it will be someone that you can love, you can respect, and you can learn from. And their role will be to support you. As we think about that, I want to talk a little bit about our investment opportunities and give you some context and framing around them, and I'm going to try to quickly get out of the way. This may be some of the areas of question. So on the back, on your very last page, you see kind of a chart that speaks to these opportunities, how a brief description of them, where they come from, and I'll note a couple of changes related to them. On this slide, you see kind of give you a sense and a picture of 2018. Our deepest investments are with our Just for Kids anchor institutions. Again, that multi-year capacity building partnership that we have with those organizations that are listed here. Arch City Defenders, ACLU of Missouri, Community Organizing Family Issues, Metropolitan Congregations United, and Missouri Healthcare for All. We also provide a support called, I'll kind of walk through some of these. We also provide continued support to our impact partners. So one of the things you learn about our shift to the language of partnership that we began with the impact partnership is that we don't let partners go. We figure out, you know this, Melinda, we don't let partners go. We're glad some of our partners don't let us go. We find ways to try to be supportive of one another. So we provide grants to continue to support the voice of well-positioned leaders with really strong organizations who have done their capacity building work to help sustain that work. We also provide what are called mission-related investments. These are investments from our portfolio to provide capital to people in the community, provide additional access to capital. So folks who are having capital campaigns. So right now, we have partnership with Justine Peterson. Justine Peterson, we provide capital to so that they can provide small dollar loans as alternatives to payday lending for people, and also provide people financial literacy supports as they utilize those small dollar loans. We provide support to IFF as they seek to leverage additional capital for nonprofits who are doing work to develop their properties, but also through consultation. And we also, this last year, provided a loan to Employment Connection for their managed services LLC, where they're building out the business of workforce development as a social innovation within their nonprofit organization. So we have opportunity for that. We are always open to conversations about growing that official opportunity to open again in 2021. But because this is a part of our investment portfolio, we're always looking for opportunities to grow that work as well. The widest area where we engage the most people is probably through our responsive grants. So I'll talk about those a bit more. So you see 22 responsive grants that we made last year. Things to note about this. Number one, we get about 60 applications a year. We got about 61 applications last year. We funded about half of them. So when you start thinking about what's worth your time, and I think that's I'm a recovering fundraiser myself, So thinking about what's worth your time, thinking about the fact that we fund about 50% of the applications that we get in. 22 of those were responsive grants. These are those that support projects that are aligned, that move people, that advance policy, that organize the community around those 4 policy zones, right? So this is where we get the lion's share of our applications. This is where we're able to support the broadest amount of partners. Things that we ask you when you apply for that. Number one, we ask those DEI questions, which I referenced before. But we also ask you, what are the other ways that we can be supportive of you? How might you leverage our building? How might you leverage other things we're doing in community that you're here about in advocacy? How might we engage in that? On that one, you should note that there are quarterly applications. One of the things we heard from our partners in a grantee perception survey a few years ago is that our grant timeline was at the wrong time to do policy work. We were doing it in the fall. People are like, by the fall, I'm done by legislative stuff done. We're trying to figure out how to get stuff pre-filed. So we said, we're just going to have it open all the time. And so there are quarterly deadlines that you see: April, July, and October. Our commitment is to get a response to you in 6 weeks, to get a check to you within 8 weeks. It also helps us to advance to the next cycle, right? So that's one of our goals. Of course, you hear from us before that, but that's a way that we can keep work moving and always be open to what you have to say and where projects may come up. We saw really critical examples of this last year where we saw the impact of the conversation about what was happening in family separation on the border. We saw an organization that as they began their year didn't know they were going to need to develop a program in the second quarter and would need some seed funding for that program. So this gives us an opportunity to be responsive, as this notes, to the work that's happening on the ground. The others that I don't want to miss are this policy campaigns and collaborative grants. Where there are opportunities where there's work moving in community, this will be even more significant. We invite you to be in conversation about these things as we prepare for 2020. There are ways that we might support initiatives that are happening that are coming up on ballot. And there are other collaborative things that we maybe need to do. We maybe need to do in order to leverage community. One we've been working on for the last year that looks like it's about to come to fruition is a partnership around healing justice in this community. How might we engage art, organizing, and the like to transform and respond and react to traumas? So we're open to conversations about those. I'll stop there. More information about all of these and resources on them can be found at Deaconess, Deaconess, I always say Deaconess Center now, deaconess.org /funding opportunities. Your direct contacts on that for now will be Michael and myself until I hire this remarkable person who's going to work with Michael on that and be a direct support to you. But I want to make sure that you have all you need here. The other thing you will find on the website at that link is support materials that help to inform our thinking around these. So you'll see links to what I talked about before, an abstract on results-based accountability, on the changing states framework, resources and slides on those things will be there as well. So these are investment opportunities. The other thing I'll say about this is always talk to us. If you've got an idea, we're trying to build a movement here, right? Our colleagues at the Ford Foundation, Darren Walker, suggests that movements need ideas, activated individuals, really great ideas, and rooting institutions, right? And so you've got better ideas than we are. You're closer to some of these issues. So if you've got something that's bubbling up, then we invite you to share those ideas with us as well. Okay. I'm going to stop, drop, roll, make space for David Narrett Flores to talk about. Actually, I'm still talking a little bit, aren't I? Engagement opportunities. I'm going to talk quick on these. I talked a little bit before about stuff that we do that we weren't giving ourselves credit for making a part of the work. Some of the initiatives that we've engaged in around community that continue to abide, and remarkable leaders are holding them up now, including some leaders in this room. So the Regional Early Childhood Council, our staff, and this predates me, a couple of these initiatives, predates the current team, I should say, Regional Early Childhood Council, St. Louis Graduates. These are efforts that staff team members were engaging in community, high-impact initiatives that we lent staff support, thinking, and time to in order to help stand up in community, and other leaders took them on. There may be other opportunities like that that make sense around an issue, which is why we want to be in dialogue with you to feel where the energy is. and where there might be some opportunities. Work with the Regional Youth Violence Prevention Task Force. Of course, Forward Through Ferguson became some of the more visible elements of that work. But this is something that's always been a part of our DNA, and so we seek to continue to advance that kind of work. So that becomes an engagement opportunity. Another is trainings and gatherings that we have here. Who've been to a training with Deaconess before in the room? All right, so some folks here, right? So we have leveraged partnerships with some of the really strong consulting partners and trainers throughout the nation to bring some resources into community to provide support beyond the grant, right? So this is also, the TCC group, the Interaction Institute for Social Change, which has done some work on facilitative leadership where we've trained people to strengthen collaboratives in our community. We have upcoming trainings with the Management Center around managing for social change, managing for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those things are coming up. If you are a grantee, particularly if you're a partner now, then you should have gotten an invitation for an April 11th and 12th training with the Management Center and some training around ethical leadership, again, as an engagement opportunity. And then finally, we also host community conversations in this space that I encourage people that some of these are really solid professional development opportunities as well as you think about your team members. We don't provide CEUs, at least not now. We haven't worked on that kind of thing. But for generative thinking around your work, these are some of the speakers who were with us last year. Now I will stop, drop, and roll for David to engage around some of the other resources that we have to support you. Please welcome David Nerett Flores.
Is this on? Great. Good morning. Thank you all for being here in the space, as Starsky mentioned, in the Justice Community Room. So again, Michael's helping me to pull up the website. So you are in the Deaconess Center for Child Wellbeing. This is movement infrastructure. This is a place that we believe is building collaborative power and organization amongst all of us in this region to share our ideas, share our mission, and to get our work done. We have been convening space for a year now. With that, as we mentioned, we've had a large number of organizations come into this space and have significant conversation and advancement of their work through that. As we noted, we've had about 13,000 unique advocates and organization members come through here. And it's about 215 convenings that we've hosted here in this space. With that, we are very excited about moving into our next year, 2019, and continuing to focus on how are we building deeper relationship with the organizations that are here, as well as the organizations that aren't here yet. How many of you have hosted a convening here? Great, thank you. How many of you want to host a convening here? That's great. See, on the website, you will see specifically two things that are of most interest to you. Under our Convene tab, you'll see the center calendar. So we're going to pull that up. And this highlights for us all the activities that are going on in the center. It's getting busy. It's continuing to get busy. You all are up here right now. Strategy and Funding Forum. Congratulations. I'm counting that. You're part of my numbers now. But this is how we engage in terms of seeing what are the organizations that are meeting here, that are hosting, that are having thought leadership. I'm also encouraging more and more folks and community folks to take a look at this, ask questions of like, hey, what is the Strategy and Funding Forums? That seems cool. How can I get involved? Or what is the St. Louis Child Abuse and Neglect Network? What are they meeting here? What are they talking about? How can I build connections and alliances with them? With that. So please take a look at this calendar, engage with that in that. The next tab with that, if we go back to convene, and then request a space, because this is what everyone wants to see, is how are we having a conversation about access to this space. So as we've noted, all of our conversations and convenings that hold here run through our strategy screens. And so looking at that worksheet, right, of seeing what public policy priority your convening and your engagement hits in. Looking at that, really interrogating that of what is that policy screen within that. We have this form, and if you don't mind scrolling down with it, ask you again kind of a worksheet of running through, of really looking through this in terms of explaining what is your organization, how is this going to impact and help your mission and drive your campaign within that, and then also who is it going to impact. So looking at what are logistics of terms for Cassell to set up the room, but also what are we moving in terms of people numbers and impact within that. So all of those requests can be submitted. They run through me, and then I have a conversation with you specifically about the potential opportunity of partnering, and what does that mean, and what does that look like, and how can we get folks to utilize this space. The other thing that I want to highlight is that not only do we find that this is movement infrastructure, and that this is allowing folks to grow, to call a place called home. If we look at the center, and then go to center-based initiatives. Thank you. These are center-based initiatives, are organizations and community programs that are community-driven, that are community-led, that are mission-aligned with us, and call the Deaconess Center home. So if you want to just scroll through that, we'll look at some of these, including our 3 co-locators that call the center home. The Deaconess Foundation has office space. Our office is space here. Unleashing Potential, formerly Neighborhood Houses, and then Vision for Children at Risk also have co-locating a space in the center, in addition to these center-based initiatives that call Deaconess Center home and continue to build interaction with this. So I want to tell an anecdote, and we can, homepage is great if questions are, about how this place moves moves the agenda and also builds power within that. So we had one evening, we are committed through this center to build a deep partnership with not only our partners here, but also our neighborhood, right? And so the Covenant Blue Neighborhood Association, which is Windsor, Finney, and Cook, the 3 streets up to Page. This neighborhood association has been meeting here since last June and calling this the center home, and we're very proud to have them and very proud to partner with them. We partnered with them to host the 18th Ward Candidate Forum here last month before the primary election. So they're meeting here, and knowing that the power of this place of multiple convenings, multiple organizations meeting here. There was another convening that went on here, and they were meeting in the Covenant Blue was meeting in our Faithfulness boardroom. Go check it out; it's a lovely space. And at that meeting, a alderman was present. I'm not going to say his name, but he was present at that. When he was engaging with that community and having conversations about their needs in their community and work, another convening was happening in this space. That convening was the Close the Workhouse campaign, which is a center-based initiative and talking about how are we closing and not replacing the minimum security prison in St. Louis because of its horrible, horrible conditions. They were meeting here. That certain alderman didn't know about this meeting, but when he found out that meeting was, he moved to the other side of the room so he wasn't seen. He felt agitated. He knew that there was power in what was going on here, in the relationships that were being built, that he saw that he needed to step aside, not be seen with that. But he couldn't be ignored. He couldn't ignore it, because after he left, the Close the Workhouse campaign saw him, greeted him, was excited to see him, and had the conversation about their campaign and their demands. And so that couldn't happen without this place. That couldn't happen with you all engaging in this place and thinking of how are we strategically using this place and advancing our agenda within that. I will note, last thing I'll note, and then I'm passing it on to Constance. In terms of professional development, that the center and the foundation offers some professional development, the trainings that Reverend Wilson mentioned in terms of the Management Center. We're also encouraging folks that if you are having development, if you're having training that is a benefit for other partners, right, others in this room, let us know so that we can say, look, this is happening under this roof, and how are we building our genuine relationships with each other as well to engage in that. So one of those conversations is there was an organization that was having some trauma-based care training here within that. They wanted to extend that invitation to the St. Louis Housing Authority and their staff, and having them and building partnerships so that they could come here in close proximity to their North Sarah complex. That's our neighbors next door. So we want to think about those opportunities as well as we move forward. How are we not just building partnerships between the foundation, the center, and you all, but amongst yourselves as well. So I'm around if you have questions. I'm usually wandering the halls. So thank you very much for being here. Constance.
Good morning again. If you need to stretch, you have 30 seconds to do so. Oh, don't let them do it alone. Come on, let's do some stretching. I'm going to do just a little segue here. There is an event that we would welcome you back to this space coming up in April, and it's April 27th, and it's actually a joint event with Deaconess Foundation, Vision for Children at Risk and Unleashing Potential. So it's really a center-hosted event. It's our Children at the Center community fair. So we're inviting all of the community, all of our neighbors to join us here at this space on April 27th from 10 to 1 p.m. And there's also an opportunity for service providers to come and set up a table, have brochures, and engage with the community. And so we will likely send you a follow-up after today with some of the links that I'm going to encourage you to use to sign up for some of the advocacy opportunities, so that will be included in that email too. Okay? All right, so 30 seconds is up. So as I said earlier, I'm the Director of Advocacy here at the Foundation. And if you look at page 2, or the backside of the first page of your little worksheet or pamphlet you have there, you see our 4 policy zones. Some of those Starsky, all of those in fact, Starsky discussed earlier this morning. But what we do is we partner with organizations in the region, in the community, and national organizations to really pursue child well-being in these 4 policy zones. And so as the Director of Advocacy, I am responsible for carrying out our strategic plan to make sure that we are great partners to you in this advocacy work, but to also propel us in the years to come so that we do see market change in the community and in the lives of the children in which we serve. So I'm going to give you, just after this slide, a few examples of how we've been engaged in this space, particularly in the last 12 months. And we'll answer Charlie's earlier question about policy development a little bit later. But I want to draw your attention to Child Advocacy Day and also invite you to join us on April 2nd, 2019. This is Missouri statewide Child Advocacy Day. It's the 37th annual Child Advocacy Day. And Deaconess Foundation, we are a part of the statewide planning committee. This is an opportunity for us to engage with our partners, invite you all to join us as we advocate for children at the state level. And we also bring along our community members and a lot of the folks that you are in contact with and serve each and every day. For many of them, this may be their first time going to the state capitol and engaging and interacting one-on-one, or usually it's a small group, with their lawmakers. So we also invite them and you to join us for an Advocacy Day training that happens on March 26th, so this upcoming Tuesday. Last year was our first year doing the advocacy training prior to Child Advocacy Day, and based on the evaluations, we were like, we've got to do this every year now. And we do that in partnership with Vision for Children at Risk. So the two of us Ruth and I will be conducting that training in this room on that Tuesday. And what we do as a part of that training, but then also the broader Child Advocacy Day, is we work with you to determine what policy initiatives that are moving through the state legislature that we either want to advocate for or discourage our representatives or senators for voting for. And we'll talk about, just briefly, a couple of those things that are priority for us on April 2nd. Yes. 5:30 p.m. So it's 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. We won't shut the doors at 6:30 because people like to, we do some role playing at the end of the training, and so they enjoy that. So, but 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. And I will include this we will include this in a follow-up email, because then there's some other links that you can sign up for. So we work with our partners to determine what is happening in the legislature right now. We know that a bill that we may have been supportive of on January 3rd or 4th when the legislature went into session may have morphed into something that is something we cannot support right now. So we usually build that. This week, in fact, I will be building our draft to the final leave behind, which identify particular bills, whether they're in the House or in the Senate, and which we would want to move forward or we would want to not. We would want to die in the legislative process, depending on those 4 policy zones that are on the back of that second page for you. And so, related to that, this CDF Freedom Schools is a piece of our advocacy strategy. And so for that program, I'm the executive director. It's a 7-week summer literacy program that is truly intergenerational. Now, I'm so glad for Sarah's question earlier today. She asked about our, UCC engagement and our relation to the UCC. So we have 4 program sites this summer, which is an expansion from last summer. We are located in UCC churches. So our host sites are in 3 UCC churches. We have one here, and it's 25 children that we serve here for 7 weeks. And so it's so much fun hearing them cheering and shouting first thing in the morning. And it's not just, you guys are cool, but I really love kids. And so they really just reinvigorate us. We do this work all year long, but for 7 weeks, we get to see each and every day the children in which we do the work on behalf of. So it's important for us to have sites at UCC churches because we think it's important, we know it's true, that giving people proximity to children makes them better advocates. And so it's a part of our strategy to bring the church members into the fold. So they're encouraged to volunteer, whether it's during the morning where they're doing the read aloud with the children. They're encouraged to volunteer to show up and engage in the afternoon activities. And they're encouraged to build relationships with the children. I do know in one family in particular, now belong. They're members of the church in which they first visited because their child was going there for the summer. And so a lot of the church members that have engaged in volunteering through the CDF Freedom Schools program at their site, many of them join us for Child Advocacy Day. So we see the full circle, and that's the intent. You too are encouraged to join us and volunteer your time and come and read to the children. I say it's intergenerational, so I'll touch on that just a little bit. We have phenomenal children, K through 5, that enroll in the program. They are taught every day by classroom facilitators, which are college students. So we've got all of our local universities represented, from Umsel to Washington University, St. Louis University, Maryville, Fontbonne, and Harris Stowe. So a lot of the local colleges, the interns that we're hiring, come from the area, even though some of them are not born and raised in St. Louis, or they may not be natives. They're not going home during the summer, and a lot of them are oriented to social justice work or education. And so they spend 7 weeks with these children and the children's family and us, and so many of them come back. I think our retention rate for the actual staff last year was about 67%. The others that weren't coming back just because they were like nursing majors and like, oh, I've got to do this internship in my nursing program. So the college children love it. We have 4 site coordinators, and they are all certified teachers. That's important because of the resource that they are to the college students related to classroom management. The model is not to have certified teachers delivering each and every day the lesson, simply because the approach and the curriculum is really an intervention to traditional public education. We are in partnership with the local school districts, so St. Louis Public Schools and Webster Groves, and cross our fingers, soon to be Hazelwood School District. And they see, based on the test results, so children are tested at the beginning of the program and at the end of the program. And after the school districts see the results and compare how the children did prior to the program and with their own test results and how they did after, they're like, oh, let's talk more about this partnership. So that's exciting. The children are learning, they're fully engaged, and you may see that middle, that talking about voting earlier, that middle picture at the bottom. The children are fully engaged in understanding the importance of voting and having a voice and being advocates for themselves. We engage the parents on this level as well. So there are parent engagement sessions, and we partner with MCU this past summer and Kofi, which are our partners throughout the year, but they delivered the parent engagement curriculum. So helping parents to also understand you are your child's first and best advocate. So I get excited about the CDF Freedom Schools program, so I don't know where we are in time, but I'm going to move ahead. And there, like I said, there's opportunities for you to engage and volunteer. The children love asking questions when you come in to read. Some of them, they always want to know if somebody's married. And like, okay, yeah, let's move on. And so those were the opportunities to engage with us. But I also wanted to just give you a snapshot. Everything that we do in the advocacy space is not captured here in this slide. But I wanted to just give you a snapshot of how we are partners in this space of advocacy with you. And so I'll just run through briefly some things over the last 12 months. Whether it's standing alongside mothers and grandmothers in East St. Louis, which is that photo at the bottom there, to call on the Housing Authority to end excessive and unreasonable fines and fees that keep families locked in poverty, or whether it's standing alongside here in this very room, some of our partners that to encourage the general public to really reject right to work, or whether it's penning an editorial for the raising of the minimum wage, which was Proposition B. We take your requests. We see what's going on in your world, your sphere, and we help, along with you, determine how best we could use our voice. So it's not just funding, and it's not just sharing the space here with you, but it's important for us to really understand and determine how we can use every one of our assets, whether it's the space, whether it's the funding, or whether it's our voice. So a lot of what the pictures that you see here are us working collaboratively with our partners. In some instances, our partners saying, hey, we've got this report that we're releasing, and we've got mothers and grandmothers that will be here at this press release. We would love to have Deaconess's voice to help amplify. And so we're like, sure, let's look at our policy zones. It fits. Okay. How can we best do that in a way that's authentic and organic, and it does not drown out the voices that are already in the space? So those are ways in which we've done that, very particularly in the last 12 months. We stand ready to advocate for the communities in which we serve, to amplify the will of the communities, and to lift our voices in conjunction with you. In Deaconess, as many of you have come to know, we see and we feel the momentum of the people and the will of the people to legislate for ourselves when our representative democracy does not do a great job of that. So we're in the space of what you may know and what we've mentioned earlier of ballot initiatives. And frankly, to Charlie's question a little bit earlier, this is a form of policy development. The people are saying this, we're going to choose and we're going to sign this initiative petition because we want to see this on the ballot, because we are better at determining what's best for us than the folks we've elected to do so, or the folks we've elected to do so don't quite have the power to carry out the will of the folks here back home. And so we believe that it's important for us to operate in this space because public access to inclusive democracy is critical for us achieving our vision of child well-being through racial equity. So yes, it's important for us to engage very early on. And so before Clean Missouri, which is that, now it's Defend Clean, we'll talk a little bit about that later. So it's important for us to engage very early on in these conversations. And so before Clean Missouri was Amendment 1 or was Clean Missouri, Deaconess Foundation was involved, and initially just really we were an early funder in the process, which guaranteed us voice in the process. And so I'll give you just a quick example of what it was. So early engagement funded research and dialed us into campaign governance in a way which helped the campaign decide who the campaign invested in to carry out the work. What are some organizations that are already tapped into the community that you should bring on board to collect signatures or to be involved in every aspect of the campaign? And because racial equity is a guiding value of ours here at the foundation, we ensured that early polling oversampled Black communities and Black voters. That way, the data could be disaggregated and scrutinized in a way that was independent and rigorous to ensure that the language was understandable and people knew what they would be voting for once it hit the ballot. And so 2020, we know, is right around the corner. We've been involved in conversations early 2018, in some instances earlier, about how we could be helpful in this space and build upon the momentum of the people to vote and to legislate for themselves through that process. So we are supportive of our partners and policy changes, whether it's in Jefferson City or Washington, D.C. For instance, if there was a public comment period related to regulations, we join our partners in commenting and being signatories or a signatory to a coalition of folks commenting on different regulations. So that's an opportunity. And once you flag these for us, we have that conversation. How might we be most helpful? And how can we bring along other people that we know may feel the same way and have the same comment? So for an example of policy changes outside of DC and Jefferson City, we are very supportive of the work of MCU and the policy changes that they have been able to make with the local school districts, and helping people to understand too that it's not just law, it's a lot of policies that administrative bodies have the control to change, and we can infiltrate those systems as well. So that's just a brief overview. Like I said, it's not everything that we do, but it gives you an idea of how we're engaged in advocacy at varying levels. And we do invite you, if you've got ideas, pitch them to us, let us know. And then we can have those conversations offline about how we can be most helpful to you and your cause. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic.
Good deal. Thank you very much, Councilman. So some of you have already asked questions and posted them on the board. So we'll seek to get to as many of those as possible, respecting the time that you've offered us. I just want to first open up for pop-up. You may have written it down and it's on the board, but you want to ask it. So for those, if we don't get some energy around that, then Matt will just begin to read them off. I want to focus first on the investment opportunities and the theory of change ones, and we've kind of grouped them there. So anything we don't get to, we can email answers to all of you because we've got you registered and got your email addresses. So anyone want to ask your own question? You want to hear your voice as well before we begin here. Or if you want to hear Matt do voiceover for your question, then he can do that as well. Yes, ma'am. We are doing that. We tend to be those are pretty directed, but we try to be transparent about where we invest funds. So great question. So who are those groups? It's groups like Gateway Center for Giving. So part of what we recognize, once heard a funder say, and I'll try to keep the stories that are brief. I once heard a partner say in a funder convening, when y'all do stuff for yourselves, you call it learning. When you do it for us, you call it capacity building, but it's the same stuff. So it's one thing to invest in learning for our partners. It's another thing to recognize we need to learn some stuff too. So we invest in tables to allow philanthropy to learn about different practices, specifically in recent years, practices around racial equity, practices around power building. So those grants are to places like the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy, Gateway Center for Giving, Grant Makers for Effective Organizations, our thought partners around capacity building work. If there are those that make sense for us to make and you have ideas about those, then we'd be glad to do that as well. We also have been convening a table of folks to try to learn about systems change philanthropy in the state because it's an underfunded space of work. We only got certain resources, so part of what we said is we want to impact how others do their work as well. Yeah. Others? Matt, they want to hear you do voiceover. Okay, yes, sir.
Mine is more of an encouragement with the day at the Capitol on April 2nd.
Yep.
We recently went to the state capitol, it's Catholic Charities, to engage with lawmakers, and it was the first time I went. So if you haven't gone on an advocacy day to the state capitol, it's something that's very worthwhile, and it's going to take all of us to really take that on, because the dismissiveness on one side in particular was eye-opening for me. And the lack of just listening or even wanting to listen. So we have to make that a priority. And so I would encourage anyone who hasn't gone to do that April 2nd with you all.
Thank you. Constance owes you $2. And we do still have room on the bus. We got 2 buses, and we still got room, and we'll get another if we need it. Yeah, Matt, let's go ahead and do 2 or 3 of them. Investment zone first.
Okay.
Yeah, let's look there.
If application is completed and submitted by April 30th, when do you receive the funds?
So within 8 weeks after you submit. So our commitment is to get you an answer within 6 weeks, funds within 8 weeks. And that's on all of the cycles. Yes.
Are you able to apply for more than one grant? For example, a grant for advocacy, a grant to advance racial equity through work in your organization?
Yes, you can apply for more than one grant. You can apply in more than one category. You can apply for multiple projects over the course of the year. Please note, racial equity for us is a lens through which we do our work. It is not an area for funding. Does that make sense? So we're not funding racial equity projects, but we recognize if you're not integrating racial equity into your child well-being project, then you're probably not going to get as far. I tell people all the time, since 2014 in America, the majority of children under the age of 4 have been children, under the age of 5 have been children of color. In 2020, next year, will be the first year that the majority of children under the age of 18 in America are children of color. If you're doing work for children and youth and you're not engaging a racial equity lens and you're not doing it from a culturally competent perspective, you're either engaging in work avoidance or you're doing work from about a generation ago.
Can it fit more than one strategy screen?
I'm sorry?
Can it fit more than one strategy screen?
Yeah, help us learn about this stuff. I was looking at the application last year from the Close the Workhouse campaign. I figured it was justice and equity for youth. Makes sense. They're going to close the workhouse. No, for them, it's family economic mobility. They look at cash bail and the extractive nature of cash bail from communities and recognize that when you're taking that money out of a household and you take a person out of a household for over 180 days because you lock them up in the workhouse and then they can't do their job, they lose their job, they can't take care of their children, that's a family economic mobility argument more than for them it is a justice and equity for youth argument. But I say it's both. Yes, you can do one that is both.
Hope I can read this. Responsive grant portfolio. One only associated with policy work, or can it be associated with work addressing strategy screens? For example, capital for school-based learning centers, build out of space.
Say that again.
Can one, I'm not sure I can read this, only associated with do you fund work only associated with policy work, or can it be associated with work addressing strategy screens?
Got it. So thank you. So it's got to be policy work addressing the strategy screens, right? So it's not an either or, it's both. The place where we have an opportunity to have a discussion about capital is with our mission-related investments. It's one of the reasons why we have that there. So if you got a capital project, an expansion project, the way that we can support in that space is to have a conversation about how to get you access to capital at a rate that's different from what's happening in the market. But no, we don't fund capital campaigns. We provide financing for those through our mission-related investments. Sounds like a follow-up. Yes?
Yes. Since Deaconess is focusing this work on policy, what role are you playing in educating community members that historically don't have access to policy making and understanding even how they can play a role in that space?
Two things. Number one, creating the space for that. This is actually exactly why this space is here and why this space is here. If folks hit me there. And we're supporting people to do that kind of convening, right? So we're doing limited numbers of it, but that's the community organizing that we fund, right? So, I mean, We Power in their work here over the course of, was that last summer now? Man, it seemed like a long time ago now. Right? They were doing that kind of education for people in the city, neighbors from this area. I tell them, nothing more powerful than mamas and grandmamas who care about their kids, and that's who is here with We Power. So that's the kind of education that our partners are doing on Monday. Was it Cap Car or Close the Workhouse here Monday? Cap Car. So here on Monday, supporting people and doing some education around Court Watch programming. And so these are the kinds of things where we're giving community members access. Much more through our partnerships than us directly. Yes.
And so does UCM provide that kind of training?
Yeah.
And MCU?
Yeah. So a number of our partners who are doing community organizing is exactly that, and it's one of the reasons why we fund it. And again, I say it's an underfunded area. Yeah. Matt?
Do you encourage multiple agency proposals?
We do. What we encourage you to do if you're doing that, number one, we're not telling you have to. That doesn't necessarily get you extra points. But we're saying if that is what you're doing already, then we encourage you to think about what are the costs to collaboration and invite us to care for the cost of collaboration. One of the things that we learned, and the staff team that was here when I got here educated me on, is that we buy a lot of Panera and pay for a lot of sandwiches, right? Because everybody tells you collaborate. No, nobody want to pay for lunch, right? So we pay for a lot of lunch. But that's a cost of collaboration. your time, right? When we talk about our impact partners and we talk about leadership grants and community, we realize that it's really valuable to have Melinda and to have Rebecca and to have Becky and to have Flint out talking about public policy, because they're service providers, but they have an access and proximity that other people get and appreciate, and so their voices matter. We also know nobody's going to give them a grant to go do that. So that's part of what we encourage, and we provide some operating support so they can go do that, right? It's an underfunded area as well. So absolutely, yes.
Corollary to that, collaboration-based outcomes?
What's the question?
The question just reads collaboration.
No, those two go together. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The top and the bottom. Do
you encourage multiple agency proposals? And then second of all, collaboration-based outcomes.
Okay. So one of the things that we look at is one of the capacities that we seek to influence is strengthened alliances and networks. So in as much as, and we have some resources for that as we talk about systems grant making on our website around funding opportunities. So we see these strengthened alliances and networks as an outcome for us. So yes, we look at those. Those can be outcomes that you put into your grant application as well. It's on the worksheet. Yes.
I think that's it under investment opportunities.
Okay, let's go to theory of change.
Okay. Working backwards. Who helped Deaconess develop the worksheet, and can they help me?
So that's great. So we did it. So yes to whoever answered, but not yes to everybody, right? You know what I'm saying? Right. So we developed it with so we work on iterative processes that were facilitated by myself and Tamitha Walker McInnes. Tamitha was a consultant with us at the time, came onto the staff team, is consulting with us again. And so, yes, that capacity is available to support you. That's part of what we're talking about around capacity building supports as well.
Next, does the theory of change encourage youth to be the leaders and advocates for this change?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that happened a few years ago, we lost something. We were more explicit in talking about how we language things. We were more explicit about asking people for applications for youth organizing. We still invite applications for youth organizing under the responsive grant making, but what we saw is when we didn't put that label on it, we saw less applications for youth organizing. So yes, absolutely, under community organizing, we really have a high focus on youth and parents engaged in that work. So we encourage you to apply if you're doing that kind of work, or if you know people doing that work, let them know. They should come tomorrow. And we invite that application. Yes.
Are the assets and outputs, what are we choosing for the application, or just what you are showing us you are putting into your theory of change?
Great. You're both choosing it for your application using the logic model as a worksheet. So what do you want from us? Look in that first column, see if it's there. You want something from the investment portfolio. You want some money. That's the investment portfolio, right? You want the building. That's a space. So it's both. It's what we have to give. That's our listing of the things that we have to give. And it's ultimately what you're asking for. But likely what you're asking for will come also more specifically in that category of where you see, it's the next column over, is outputs there. It'll most likely be in the outputs area, less in the assets and inputs area.
Okay. How do you distinguish child well-being from family and community well-being?
I wanted to get this question. Thank you very much. So we don't as much, and I should say we didn't define it for ourselves. In 2014, we partnered with the Brown School of Social Work to engage in some convening over the course of the year. To develop a child well-being symposium, began to gather child advocates in rooms like this to look at some of the research on child well-being, global research on child well-being, to see what the inputs and outcomes are for child well-being globally. And we invited that group to come up with a definition of child well-being informed by the research for this community. So when you look at this theory of change, the last two columns, at the bottom of the first column on community results, you see the community affirms a child's right to well-being and takes responsibility to create the circumstances for each child to flourish. And then on the last column, you see all children in St. Louis grow and develop as kids their age and stage should, have what they need to be successful adults, and are able to enjoy being kids. That's our definition of child well-being, because it is this community's research-informed, advocate-informed definition of child well-being. And we do not see that as separate from community well-being at all. Our broad mission is about the health of the St. Louis metropolitan community and its people. our specific vision is around child well-being because we believe the well-being of children. And I say it like this: if children are happy, they dance. If children are dancing and smiling and singing, then the community is healthy. Then that's how we define that. We see those inextricably linked. Yes, maybe, I know we're right at 10:09, so let's get maybe 3 in quick succession.
Justice and equity for youth. Can kids be well without their parents? How does immigrant justice become a priority?
It absolutely is a priority that we see exactly through that lens of justice and equity for youth. We continue to invite applications in that area so that we might do more learning and follow folks who are moving in that era like Mira and Micah and others, Micah Project and others.
Okay. And then I'm going to ask it anyway. Okay. How are you using results-based accountability with someone who has gone through the certification process?
Yeah. You said with someone who's gone through the certification or has someone?
And,
right?
and has.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So I don't know that anyone locally has been certified. I've been through the training. Serena Muhammad has been through the training, and we provoked Casey to develop the training out from what we experienced. They developed that project and have begun to roll it out. So we're using it as we kind of talk about what those frameworks are and seeking to inform people about it. We've not gone through certification, but want to, if you know of other additional resources where we can amplify that in community, especially as we talk about collective impact and others, we want to get people to being more clear about population level outcomes and what accountability continues to look like.
So that's it under theory of change and investment opportunities.
Okay. The other ones can be really quickly grouped. So let's go ahead and policy advocacy. Someone asked a question about non-grant support. Can people who are not funded get access to the resources of some of our partner support? Yes, particularly the building and the space and those kinds of things. The trainings, absolutely. We prioritize in the trainings people who are already partners. It's a way of deepening our investment there. So yes, there's space and room, but we do prioritize based upon the space.
Oh, you already asked this one too. Is Deaconess currently involved with community impact study? And if so, can the statistics be shared?
We are not engaging in that. We tend not to because those large level community assessments and impact studies are taken on by larger partners in philanthropy, United Way, MHB. MHB did some really, so our mental health board has done some really great work to align some of the studies that were already out there, so we're not studying. The things that we study are different. So things like we co-funded with Missouri Foundation for Health a power audit of the state of Missouri. So it's not as much about need-based as much as it's about if we're really going to get to advancing this policy for progressive governance, what are the investments we need to make in pipelines of leadership? What are the investments we need to make geographically? What's the demography that is shifting? Not as much around kind of what the needs are. So we invest differently based upon our theory of change, but we seek to amplify those reports and platform them when they come out.
Okay. We started researching education funding to produce a policy brief. Our research led us in another direction to not just equitable funding, but district accountability. How would we clearly describe where we started and where we are going now?
Love to talk offline about that. I know this is a specific one with a red circle, so I think that's one we could talk offline about.
Questions were asked already.
That's it. A couple of quick ideas. Want to leave with some ideas, or if there's any other questions in the community. It's 10:12. We want to say goodbye at 10:15 because we're already late. So yes, sir. If we have a special interest on foreign-born population? We don't have special programs that we do for foreign-born populations, but again, through all of our platforms, we seek application around those issues. So part of it is helping us to learn through those platforms. Yeah. Great. Anything else for the good of the cause? We will not. That is not. So part of it. So good word about trainings from my trustee here. Our trainings tend to be platform supports, not necessarily topical issues. So a case in point, our April 11th and 12th training is about solid management. Right? So what does it look like to manage and delegate? Because we know, you know what nonprofits do, and I say this as a nonprofit person, I've never worked for a for-profit entity in my life. We take people who are really good at doing a job and say, you know what, you should lead all the people doing that job. and realize we just changed that person's job. And we underfund professional development, so we didn't teach that person how to be a manager or a supervisor. We just took them because they were really good at that work. So part of what we're platforming is how do we support people in being really good supervisors? How do we support people in doing strategic planning? What we don't believe is that we can do that work better than you, right? So you're a Gamaliel affiliate, UCM, MCU, you all know Sacred Conversation. What we'll do is say, hey, we got a really big room and some nice space and great technology. Would y'all like to do Sacred Conversations on race? Talk to David about when you can do it and what works for your schedule, right? We'd love to platform that, but we wouldn't be the people who are best positioned to do it, right? And there are topics like that in all of your work, so please be in conversation with us about those. All right, 10:14. All right. Anything else for the good of the cause? We are deeply appreciative that you all are with us. We're glad that you spent this morning with us, and we hope that you've had some opportunity, you've been provoked to partner with us in some way, because we love to partner with you. My apologies for going over on time. That's what happened when you give a preacher a captive audience who hadn't preached in a while. But we would love to hear more from you. Please make sure that you are registered and checked in no matter what time you came in today, so that we have your information to follow up with you. Thank you all for coming out. God bless you. Good night.